De-dollarization is back in the spotlight with a new report from J.P. Morgan sounding the alarm about the dollar's withering share of official reserves, assets held by central banks. These make up about $8 trillion, which is roughly a third of all dollars in existence. For perspective, if they were all sold overnight, we would see 40% inflation in the U.S. And the trends are concerning. The dollar share just dropped to a record low 58% of reserves. That actually drops to 49% if you include gold, which over that same period has jumped from 11 to 15% of official holdings. In fact, at this point, gold is now the number 2 currency for official reserves after the US dollar. Now, this is fantastic if you own gold, but it is not so great if you own dollars. Reuters correctly tags the problem as the suicidal American seizure of Russia's central bank dollars, which told every central bank on Earth that dollars are a risky thing to own, along with deficits reaching towards $2 trillion, all with a potential gold-backed BRICS currency driven by a China desperate to dethrone the dollar's dominant reserve currency status. Now, zooming out, while the dollar's lost a third of its value since the 1980s, that was the Plaza Accord, it's actually held up pretty well during COVID, rising 7% since 2019. The problem is what's driving that rally is not prudent financial leadership from Washington. It is the clown shows overseas, from Europe to Japan to a China that may be on the cusp of a competitive devaluation. After all, in the currency game, you don't have to be good. You just have to be not much worse than the other clowns. After that, if you're the dollar, you can just coast on former glories before Nixon killed the greenback. Moreover, going back to those Morgan numbers, the dollar should actually be a lot stronger after the COVID lockdown sent much of the world into depression, immediately followed by 2 hot major wars involving potentially 3 continents. After all, the reserve currency is the safe haven, meaning when things go pear-shaped, you should get a flight into the dollar, not out of it. We saw this in 2008 when the danger was actually coming from the U.S., and yet the dollar gained 20% in the 2 months after Lehman crashed. That suggests that whatever dollar strength we're seeing at the moment is very much transitory, while the long trends that Morgan is worried about are eroding the foundations, even if new wars slap some fresh lipstick on that fading safe haven. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. The fate of the dollar is written in Washington deficits. If there is zero prospect of getting them under control, as appears to be the case, then the dollar is doomed. It may die slower than other currencies. It may die faster if migrants, wars, or if some fresh insanity like UBI tip the balance. But a dollar that's lost a third of its value since the 2008 crisis and 90% of its value since Nixon is never coming back. Meanwhile, countries like China are watching like vultures biding their time as the dollar crawls slower and slower, weighed down by trillion-dollar deficits and a corrupt political system that competes to drain the treasury and hand the proceeds to activist sponsors and lobbyists. We could fix it, of course, in a day, pass a balanced budget amendment, put the Fed back on gold, or get rid of it altogether. Unfortunately, if history is a guide, that will not happen without a crisis. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.